I'm Dr. Aisha Steplike-Johnson, the Dean of Liberal Arts, and I would like to welcome you to this morning's session on the Accelerated Learning Program. And I have the honor of introducing Dr. Jamey Gallagher, who is our presenter. He's been teaching at the Community College of Baltimore County since 2010 and has been heavily involved in the Accelerated Learning Program, called ALP, ever since. He is currently the co-director of the Accelerated Learning Program. Previously, he taught at community colleges in New Jersey. He has published in the Journal of Teaching English in the two-year college and presented on the Accelerated Learning Program at state and national conferences. Dr. Gallagher has a PhD in Rhetoric and Composition from Lehigh University and an MA in Writing Studies from St. Joseph's University. His research interests involve responding to student writing using multimodality approaches and developing innovative approaches to assessing basic writing. Since 2013, he has chaired the National Conference on Acceleration in Developmental Education. Today, he will speak about Rethinking Developmental Writing, the Accelerated Learning Program. This session will describe the Accelerated Learning Program at the Community College of Baltimore County, which is a form of mainstreaming developed to raise success rates and lower the attrition rates for students placed into developmental writing. The session this morning will focus on the following 5 areas. The problem. What is the problem that the Accelerated Learning Program addresses? Structure. How are ALP classes different from traditional developmental classes? Why does ALP work? And the results. What results have been seen? He will present both internal data and also data developed by the Community College Research Center at Columbia University. Cost. Is the Accelerated Learning Program more expensive than other programs? And 5, faculty development. What kind of faculty development has been implemented to ensure the continued success of the program? So at this time, I present to you Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you for coming. We just had all our meetings. We had a SOLA meeting, School of Liberal Arts meeting, and I noticed that we all sat up in the back row. So I'm assuming you guys are all faculty back there. Is that true? Are you guys faculty? Yes, mostly? Okay. Mostly English or? English? Okay, good. I wanted to thank, first of all, Dr. Williams and also Stephanie Falana, who absolutely has it on the ball. She kept on making sure that everything was in place beforehand, so she deserves a lot of credit for this whole thing, I believe. I definitely sense a lot of hunger out there. Hopefully it's not just hunger. Hopefully it's intellectual hunger as well. If my stomach grumbles, you'll have to excuse me. But it's getting a little late here in the day. So I'm just going to kind of jump in and give you a little bit of a introduction to myself, who I am. So I've been teaching for the past 3 years at the Community College of Baltimore County. I've been teaching for about 8 years altogether. So the 5 years before that were really as an adjunct. So I was trying to cobble together a living by going to various campuses, as most people do. When I first started at CCBC, they told me about this great program called ALP. They said that it allowed developmental students to get through to the credit class, pass the credit class in 1 semester. And so right away I thought, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Because I was a writing guy, and I thought, what do students need? They need more time to write, to develop as writers. They don't need less time. But I came in good faith, and I taught the ALP for the first semester. I had 8 students in that class. We were teaching in small cohorts. And so I had an 8-person class. At the end of the semester, I had 3 students left. So in one way, I felt very disheartened. I felt like I'd probably not done the best job as a teacher. But on the other hand, I felt like this is absolutely the way we should be teaching developmental writing. Because those 3 students were absolutely ready. They were as ready to go on to 102 as the typical quote-unquote credit students. So I am something of a new convert to the ALP program, or to ALP. And I've been the co-director since January. I'm usually kind of the internal guy, and the other co-director goes out and does the traveling and public speaking. But I fill in once in a while on that front as well. So an outline, you already got this, so I'm not going to go through it in depth. You know, the problem, what is ALP, the results, and what about costs? I don't think I'll have time to even talk about faculty development, but if I do, I can tell you what we're doing for that. So as far as the problem, we've heard a lot of this already from the keynote speaker, talked about all this attention that's being paid to developmental education right now. Out in the kind of common culture, they call it remedial, which always makes my skin crawl. But developmental education, everybody's talking about it. What's happening in New York was kind of news to me. But in Florida, I know they're trying to make it voluntary whether students go into developmental classes or not. Instead of being placed into developmental, they can decide, which seems to me a recipe for disaster. They're doing similar things in Connecticut. So right now, there's a whole heck of a lot of attention being paid to developmental education. And one reason for that is disappointing results. I don't want to make this an attack on traditional developmental education. So if you've been somebody who's spent your life in developmental education, you've done good work. There are people who pass through that system who are successful now thanks to really good, dedicated teachers in traditional developmental education. But I think you'll agree, we can all agree, that the results we've seen have not been what we would like them to be. So you can see that some of the data is from the Gates Foundation, where they found that 3/4 of developmental students don't receive a degree or certificate within 4 years. For community college students, maybe that's not surprising. 4 years is not that long a span of time. A lot of our students are working and part-time. But still, only 25% are graduating. This from the CCRC, the Community College Research Center at Columbia, is kind of more startling for me, that few students who are referred to developmental education ever get through the first credit class in English. So only 45% pass English 101 in 4 years. So I think this should give us pause and make us think about maybe we can rethink how we're doing developmental education, especially with writing. So you'll hear all these attacks on developmental education. You'll hear things like, why should we be paying twice for some students we're supposed to get already? You know, they're supposed to get their education in high school, the basics. They're here now. Shouldn't they be doing college-level work? You'll hear, not everyone belongs in college. And I thought it was really telling that the keynote speaker was in a vocational situation in his schooling. And so was Uri Treisman when he spoke. He was being kind of shunted into this vocational setting. So a lot of people will say not everyone belongs in college. Complete College America, which has used our program as kind of an example of what you should do instead of remediation, they call developmental education a bridge to nowhere. So our responses to that would be that many of our students are returning to college after spending a long time away from school. I just saw this statistic when I was at my fall focus, which is the convocation for us. For our students, 11% of them are coming directly from high school. Only 11%. So obviously, we're not talking about students coming out of high school and needing what they should have already had. And the other two reasons are really kind of social justice issues. This community college is what provides people with a second chance. I truly believe that. I do believe that developmental education is the most democratic portion of higher education. And this chart kind of proves that point. So on the left-hand side, you have students' families who make very little, $18,000 or less, have a 50% chance of landing in developmental classes. Whereas if you're making $100,000 or more, you only have an 18% chance. So this is definitely a social issue, a socioeconomic issue that we're talking about with developmental education. So we realized that something was going wrong with our Dev Ed classes, and we wanted to do more. And we did a study back when we were Essex Community College in Baltimore. Now we're the Community College of Baltimore County, and we kind of, this big monster that sucked up these 3 separate community colleges. One of them was Essex Community College. And back in '88 and '89, we started to do a study of our developmental program. I wasn't there at the time. I was graduating from high school at that time. Maybe some of you were not even born at that point. But Peter Adams, who was really the founder of ALP, started to study the developmental education program. And he found that 57% of students were passing and 43% were failing. Then he studied what happens to them when they go into the credit class. He found that 81% were being successful, whereas only 19% were failing. So at the time, he was pointing to this and showing everybody this and saying, look at what a great job we're doing in developmental writing. We're getting our students ready. 81% of them are doing well in 101. But even at the time, he kind of sensed that something was not right. And so he took this data and he kind of presented it in a different way. And this is what we call the pipeline model. So on the left-hand side, you have students coming into the pipeline. On the right-hand side, eventually, you would have graduation or completion, a degree of some kind. So again, this is the same data. So 57% passed, 43% failed. This is what was really surprising to us. So there were students who passed the developmental. For us, it's 052. This is the second level writing class. There are students who passed that and didn't take any writing class ever again. So that's 135 students we lost. They're completely gone to us, even though they were successful. And that really got us thinking about what we could do differently. So again, when you put it in this timeline, it's not 81% successful. It's only 33% of the original number that is successful. So that means, of course, that 67% dropped out. They're gone. And those are students that we could have served better. And so we asked ourselves at the time, why do students drop out? What is this issue? And we got a bunch of English teachers together, and these are the kind of answers we gave. It's because they can't write a thesis statement. It's because there are too many sentence fragments, no concrete examples, subject-verb agreement, confusing words, MLA format is too difficult, etc. We truly believe it's none of the above. It's not that students can't do the work. And I think if you've ever taught developmental education, traditionally, you notice that most of your students, or a good number of your students, are gone halfway through the semester. We're losing students, and they're failing, not because they can't do it, but because they just simply disappear. And so when we ask students why they might we've been given this survey for years where we ask students why they might drop out. We can't ask them why they do drop out because the dropouts are gone and we can't contact them. But we ask them, what are the major issues that might cause you to drop out? They'll say things like financial issues, legal problems, changes at work, car trouble, abusive situation, medical problems, eviction, problems with children, they got laid off. Life happens. And I think I've definitely had students with each of these issues in the last 3 years, multiple times in each semester. This is what's happening with our students' lives. There's also kind of another layer of problems that our students have to undergo, and that's becoming discouraged or losing confidence, not feeling like they're college level, feeling isolated. They weren't prepared, the stress becomes too great, in other words, affective issues. So these things that are kind of weighing on them. And what we've started to do is lump these two things together, life issues and affective issues, and think of them as non-cognitive issues. Non-cognitive is a term that has a lot of salience in the field right now. A lot of people are using it. A lot of people use it kind of differently. I saw a wonderful speaker last week, Luke Wood, who works with African-American men and trying to figure out what's causing this achievement gap. And he separated it out. Non-cognitive issues were the affective, and then the life issues, he called them environmental issues. So there are different ways to kind of tease these out. But I think it's important that we pay attention to these things. So what is the solution? Well, for us, one of the solutions was ALP. ALP answers some of the questions. You know, we're also talking about sentence fragments. Some of us talked about thesis statements, things like that. But we're also paying attention to these non-cognitive issues in certain ways. So before you find out what ALP is, I'll give you some of the context in which it was developed. I think we're in some ways similar to you and in some ways very different from you as a community college. So who we are, 81% of our students place into one or more developmental class. That's a huge percentage. I'm not sure where that you guys are with that. I assume it's probably pretty similar. It's pretty similar across the country. 65% place into writing, 77% place into mathematics, and 58% place into reading. So do you guys have a separate reading department? Yes. You do? A separate course, but it's not a completely separate department. Okay, okay. Because that actually, when I start to talk about the structures, that kind of, we have a separate reading department. And that complicates things a lot with what we can do, and kind of, I think it's probably advantageous not to have a reading department when you're talking about these kind of structural changes. So the number, we have about 33,000 credit students, the same number of non-credit students. The average age of our student is 29. We have more male than female. We have about 50% students of color. Our VP just said that's going to go up to 53 or 54% this coming semester. 62% work 20 or more hours per week. Yes?
What is African Americans and
It's majority African American, yes. Our school is not diverse in terms of, we do have some international students, but it's very black and white. CCBC, yes. So we have more part-time than full-time students. And this is our developmental sequence before ALP and currently. So this is what we still have. We have 3 levels of math that students can place into. It sounds similar to your Essex. We have 2 levels of reading that students can place into. And we have 2 levels of English. ALP is designed to attack this 052 population, to really serve them at the best that we can. Then we have a 101, of course, and a 102. Almost all of our certificates and degrees require the 102. That's changing a little bit, but by and large, students have to take 102. Just to give you an idea of the percentage of students we're serving. So again, this is the same thing I already told you. 65% will place into developmental writing. Of those 65%, 87% of them place into 052. So this is the biggest population of students for developmental writing. And a very small percentage will place into 051. And those lower level students are what we're struggling to deal with more. I mean, I think we have a really good answer. ALP is a great answer for the 052 students. 051, we're not quite sure what to do with them. Right now we have a program called ACLT, which if you look at this slide, let me see, the pointer, these 4 classes right here, ACLT takes those 4, turns them into a 1-semester, 5-credit class called academic literacy. And it's a really intensive kind of practice college class. We give them high-level academic text to read, and it's much more successful than the standalones. So just to give you an idea of how we came up with this idea of ALP, so in 88, 89, we did some of the research. In 93, we looked at that research and started thinking about it. Particularly Peter Adams started thinking about, at the time it was called mainstreaming, which is putting developmental education students in with your normal population or your standard population. In fall 2006, there was a meeting at Pizza Hut with a number of faculty members who got together and kind of hashed out what we could do about ALP or about developmental writing. 2007 was a launch of ALP. 2007, 2008, there was a five-section pilot. Then we've been doubling since 2012. So it went from 5 to 10 to 20. And right now we have 120 sections each semester of ALP. So we've grown quickly, and we've scaled up significantly. Right now we're at the point where some people say we have maximum enrollment in ALP. I'm not sure that's entirely true. It depends how you define that, but we have a lot of students in these classes. And so the things we talked about when we were coming up with the ALP, what would be important for this kind of developmental education program? One, that it was a faculty initiative. It wasn't something that was foisted on us. It was something that we came up with ourselves. We thought it was very important that we take the lead in this, and we develop this as a faculty initiative. The co-requisite model, where students are enrolled in both a credit class and a developmental class at the same time, was very important to this model. We did a lot of work with advisors and registration personnel. This takes a lot of kind of integration between the campus personnel, and we've done a lot of work with this, and actually we continue to do a lot of work with this. It's not something that ends. We have to go every semester to the advisors and talk about what ALP is and what they think it is and whether we're matching up. Because sometimes a lot of what happens is that advisors will think that ALP is for the cream of the crop of your developmental students. And we found that it's not, that it's for everybody in that 052 section, and I'll show you some data that supports that in a second. And we had an emphasis right away on collecting data. So we wanted to prove that what we were doing was working, so right away we had data collection going on from the very first semester. And that's been really important for these kinds of presentations and just for showing that the program works. So what is the structure of ALP? This will give you a good visual. A student will come in, and he or she will be tested and placed into 052. So this student with the red hat, for whatever reason, has been placed into 052. And we have a horrible placement system. I'm embarrassed by it. It's AccuPlacer, and it's the sentence skills portion. So we're assessing students based on whether they can restructure a sentence, on whether they can write or not. I think it's horrible. We're working on changing it. I'm actively working to change it, and we'll see what happens. But right now, we have an AccuPlacer score. That student is placed into 052. It's placed into that 101. Instead of placing into the 052, we'll allow the students to take a 101 class. And they're placed into that class with 9 other developmental students. So 10 developmental students, 10 students who have placed directly into 101. So these purple guys, for whatever reason, are the credit students. And that's taught by a teacher. It's taught like any other 101. It's very important to us to keep the integrity of the 101. So the same number of assignments, the same kinds of essays, everything you do in a 101, you do in an ALP 101. It's the same exact class. What gets different is then that student will have a second class, an additional class, directly following the 101 is how we do it. So directly following the 101, that student and the other developmental students has a class with the same teacher. So it's an additional class period. We used to be 8 students, now it's 10 students, where it's a small cohort. You get to know these students really well. You get to help them become competent 101 students. So there are reasons why we think this is effective. And looking at this side, why we think this is important is it really reduces the stigma of developmental classes. So if you think of the old style developmental classes, students got a textbook that looked like it belonged in the 5th grade. And they kind of hid it, and their classrooms were generally in the basement, and they didn't want to tell anybody that they were taking a class that they weren't getting any credit for. So this changes that. They're getting credit. They're in college. They're doing college-level work. It also improves attachment. Yes? Yes. They're registered for both classes. Yeah. This is kind of an interesting kind of, I don't know, conundrum. But they register for two separate. They register for the 101 and the 052. But as a teacher, you want it to feel like one class. So you want the 052 to feel like this is part of the 101. This is not some separate developmental class. This is a cohort class that's directly tied to the 101. But it is two separate registrations for our students. Yes?
Is the instructor of English 101 the same as
Yes.
Part 2?
Yep. For us, it is. And that's very important, I think. There are other schools that do it differently, that have two different teachers, and a lot of that is accreditation reasons, because developmental classes can be taught by somebody with a bachelor's in some places, and you have to have a master's to teach composition. I'm not sure how it is here. I think that's the Mid-Atlantic schools. I'm not positive. Another important part of this 101 section is that it provides stronger role models. So these purple students are supposed to be much better students. Very often you'll find that the credit students need just as much work or as much help as the other students. But I find there are always one or two really good students in the credit class that everybody looks up to as kind of real college students, and this is what you should do. And reasons why this other section, the small 10-person thing works, why kind of what goes into the success of that, I think it encourages a cohort effect. So these students get to know each other really well. Anybody who's ever taught a class of 10 students knows how different it is than teaching 30 students or 20 students. Yes? The English 101 is 3 credits. That is also 3 credits. Yes, they are both 3 credits. Yes. Are they aware? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So our advisors know about the program. We've done a lot of work with them. So they explain what the program is and how it works. A lot of people will ask, why do the 052 students come? You know, if they're only going to get credit for the 101, why do they come to the 052? And I think it's a very simple answer. These students immediately see the value of the 052 cohort section. They immediately see how it's helping their grade, helping them actually succeed in 101. So I've never, as a teacher, had a problem with attendance in these classes. Even that first semester, I lost students because they disappeared. It wasn't because they weren't coming to the 101. Yes?
What about, for example, the students that only take English 101?
Mm-hmm.
Do they see the other students that are taking this too as, well, you have a stigma, you have...
Right. No. So did you hear the question? So the question was, what about the credit students? Do they ever feel like there's a stigma attached to them? Or do they ever kind of question why these students are in their class? I've never had it happen that the 101 students even know that anything different is going on. We don't talk about this as an ALP class. We talk about this as a 101 class. And it's the same kind of thing they would do in a 101 anyway. Very often students will self-identify. So the 052 cohort students, they'll say, oh, I have another class with Professor Gallagher. And I was actually standing very close to a student when she said this to a colleague, to a classmate. And I'm sure that's why she said it. But she actually said, I have the honor of going to another class with Mr. Gallagher. I'm pretty sure she was brown-nosing, but I'll take it, you know. I thought it was wonderful. But, I mean, they do honestly see the benefit of these classes. So let me just go through this, and I'll ask if there are any more questions. So this changes the attitude towards the developmental class. So no longer is it, this is going to help you next semester, but this is going to help you in the next class you take. It allows for individual attention. Again, that 10-person thing absolutely is important, the 10-person cohort. It gives you time as a teacher, and writing teachers know that if you spend one-on-one time with a student, you'll see their writing issues much more clearly than you will with a 20-student class. You know, you immediately see what they need, and then they're able to see what they need as well. And it allows time for these non-cognitive issues. So we actually talk about these life issues, what's happening in your life. And I don't give them answers, because I'm no expert. But the people in the classroom will chime in and have something to share. And of course, that's up to the individual instructor. I've had students in 2 different instances get arrested near the end of the semester. One student did not tell me anything. One student, I heard it, kind of from I was just kind of eavesdropping. So I just heard her talking about it. The other student came to me right away. She said, I have this problem. How am I going to deal with it? Help me through this. So we're not saying you have to go to every student and have them tell you what their life situation is. But to be there as a resource, I think, is important. And then it allows for the coordination of the 2 classes. So again, should feel like one class for students. You're doing stuff in the 052 that's going to help students in the 101. That doesn't mean you're working on 101 papers all the time. That means they're doing additional writing that helps them do the kind of writing they would do in 101. So at this point, does anybody have any questions on kind of the structural stuff? Yes? For grammar, we want to make sure that people at our school, at least, are not treating this as a grammar class, which I think is the temptation. We don't do skill and drill. We talk about helping students reduce the frequency and severity of error in their writing. So we don't talk about grammar in the traditional way. Some people will approach it by trying to think of the fewest number of terms, grammatical terms, that students need. And that's kind of what I do. I talk about clauses, I talk about independent and dependent clauses, I talk about phrases, and that's it. And I don't think it's important, actually, that they know those terms. I think it's important that they understand that there are different parts of sentences and they can play around with them and move them around, and it makes a difference on how you do it. So it depends how grammar heavy you are as a teacher. I think ALP allows for a lot of kind of flexibility, which is why it's nice. But with our program, we are definitely not grammar heavy. Yes?
You might have answered this earlier. Things fall out of my ears pretty quickly. Okay, but the students are both in the English 052 and the 101. Mm-hmm. 052 is your higher level developmental course, but it's also your much larger developmental course than the lower one.
Yeah.
Are the students in this ALP program, can any student in 052 opt to be in the program, or are students selected as kind of a upper subgroup in 052 to have that opportunity?
Right. Yeah, we're very adamant that it's not the upper subgroup. We think the entire range of 052 students benefits. And I'm going to show you some statistics in a while that support that. There's actually talk to allow some of these 052 students into the ALP as well, which a lot of 051 student teachers think that's a horrible idea, because these students have some serious issues going on. But we found that it helps the lower level just as much as it helps the higher level 052 students.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes. There's a question down here.
Down here?
Yes.
What if the student does not then advance out of English 101? Mm-hmm. Do they repeat both courses?
Right. There are a bunch of different options. At the end of the semester, a student can pass both, which is what we want them to do. A student can pass the 052 and fail the 101, which happens not too frequently, but it happens maybe once or a semester for me personally as a teacher. So it happens that students then have to repeat, but they have to repeat only the 101. They've passed the 052 section. There's actually cases, and we've only had 2, where students have passed the 101 and failed the 052. Yeah. Then we pass them on because they passed the 101, and that's the credit class. But what happened there was honestly bad teacher planning, and that teacher was asking for way too much in the 052, and so the students were overwhelmed, and they were like, okay, I only have so much time, I'm going to devote to the 101 because I get credit in that. And so he was structuring the class really, I don't want to say incorrectly, but incorrectly. Yes.
Right here.
That's
Yeah.
very much the exception. Over 6 years, that's happened twice. And it was the same teacher both times.
I have a question regarding the 052 students. Now, you have a cohort there, a large number, right? Which group, you say the top group, 052, go into 101? But how do they go into 101? Do the students self-select to go in there?
Into the program, right now, initially it was something that advisors said, you should go into this, and they suggested it. Right now, we've moved to the point where this is the way students go into 052. They go in ALP. And if they can't do 2 classes for whatever reason, or their math gets in the way, their reading gets in the way, whatever the issue is, we do have a small number of standalone 052s that students now will have to sign off. They'll have to get those signed off to get into the standalones. But this is the way we do 052 by and large right now.
What has been the response
Of the students? The students like it. They love this, yeah. It gets them through in one semester. I think, in some ways, I think we still need to do better work explaining what it is in the front end, because students are still not quite sure why they're in this class sometimes. But when it helps them get through and get credit, I think they love it, yeah. And I've taught the ACLT, which are the 5-credit crunched courses with the lower level. And then you still have that developmental attitude in those classes. Students come in and they say, why should I do this? I'm not getting credit. You have none of that in this class. Because 101 is first. This is your expectation. You're a college student now. You're going to do college level work. And I've never had any student say, why am I in this developmental class? Where I've had that all the time in ACLT or in standalones. Do you have another?
I had a couple questions. I have the mic.
Okay.
I have the mic. First, if you're running the 052 with literally 10 students, did you get any pushback from your administration, from the budget office, saying, how do we pay somebody to come in and teach a class with 10 students? That's one question. And then I've taught composition courses, a 101, where they're attached to a workshop that's in support. Sounds a little like the 052 becomes kind of a workshop. Would you agree with that?
I would, to some extent. I'd agree that you do much more workshop. Do you mean workshop as in we're going to workshop your class, or workshop as in everybody get around a computer and work? The second?
Well, no, I don't mean that in a strictly composition sense of like we're going to workshop your writing and bring it in and share.
You mean this is a chance for you to
But
work?
It seems like the 052 is like a support course,
Yeah.
For the English 101 now, as opposed to being like really a separate course. And it seems like from you're teaching both of these. So do you treat it as such?
I do treat it as a support course. Absolutely, this is a support to help you in 101. But I don't treat it as a workshop, as we're just going to work on our papers now, and you're going to be on computers. I'm going to come around and help you. Some of the time that might be useful. But I'm going to show you in a little while. I think it's the next slide, actually. No? Yeah, what we do in ALP classes. So I'm going to show you exactly the different approaches people take, and it's not just a workshop, but that's a small part of it. Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing your ideas with us about this program. And I wanted to ask you if there is a space in this program for teacher dialogue, for teachers to share with each other, stories about what they're doing and what's working and what's not working, and also their ideas about teaching.
Absolutely.
I think there's a space for that. And also, I wanted to ask you, are there any particular thinkers whose ideas you draw from more than others? Just very quickly, myself, a couple of quick people whose ideas have influenced the way I teach English. One is Paulo Freire, who's had tremendous success in Brazil with students who were completely illiterate, and he's got them like up and running very quickly. A second person is Frank Smith, who has this amazing theory about a literacy club, how we learn from the company we keep, and how it's our identities, that, you know, whether we see ourselves as the kind of people who are likely to read and write, that has a lot to do psychologically. And some of that has been, I think, damaged by in past schooling, which has not been very good, you know, skill and drill and, you know, stuff like that. And the third person is Jerome Bruner, who turns 99 this year, and he's done some extraordinary research on storytelling and how we learn from simply telling our stories. So I think there ought to be a space, like I said, where teachers can also tell their stories.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And to answer kind of the first question, I'm not sure how much I can get into the second question, but the first question about teachers getting together, we do it in a couple different ways. One, we have kind of formalized faculty training, which we call an institute, but it's much more, let's get around for a week and talk about teaching writing. What is teaching writing all about? And by and large, people talk about how rarely we do this in community colleges. You know, we're all teaching 5 classes or however many classes you teach a semester. But the Institute is one place we do that. We also have these things called Apples and Oranges. I didn't come up with the name, but they're just very informal kind of brown bag lunch venues where we get together and anybody who teaches ALP can come and just talk about what's going on in their classroom and you know, what's happening. As far as the theoretical stuff, I mean, right now I'm very interested in writing about writing, that whole movement, Downs and Wardle. And I think ALP helps that in the sense that these students are now kind of apprentice writers. That's how I treat them. I'm kind of the master writer, and I'm going to help you, your apprentices. And I think that helps in the ALP. Greg Owen Thompson, who wrote about third spaces, a lot of their ideas went into the ALP structure. And I realized I didn't answer the budgetary question with the 10 students. One thing that helps is we have very small classrooms where we teach these classes. They have like a long seminar table, and our kind of facilities people have been very kind in turning old closets into ALP rooms and just weird spaces. There are all kinds of weird spaces that they turn into ALP rooms. And the other thing, and I probably won't get to this, so I'll just tell you that the kind of skinny now about the costs. It's more expensive in terms of faculty hours that you need to staff these classes, but it is slightly less expensive per successful student. So when we're talking about completion, everybody's talking about completion. This is less successful per successful student, less expensive per successful student. And I can show you the data that kind of suggests that later on. And it happens in not 1 year, but 1 semester. So we're getting students through faster at slightly less cost per successful student. And it's all worth it, in my opinion. Did we have another question, or should I go on? Okay, I'll go on. So what we do in the ALP classes are, people will conduct it as a writing workshop. Again, what you were just saying, but more in the terms of kind of composition pedagogy where we're workshopping people's papers. A lot of people will answer questions left over from the credit class. So almost every teacher I know will start this class, the cohort class. So what do I need to explain from 101? What don't you get? And then that can become an entire class. And a lot of times you'll realize you need to go back to the 101 and explain to them what you thought they understood already. So it's kind of a feedback loop here with the 101 and 052. This one is, for me as a teacher, the most important as a writing teacher. Providing opportunities for more writing practice. So a lot of short papers that will either reinforce the kinds of things done in the 101, or will prepare them for papers in the 101. So if I do an analysis paper in 101, they will be doing additional analysis papers in 052. It's not that they're working on the 101 work in 052. They're doing more of that kind of writing. So I talk a lot about academic moves that academic writers make. You know, what are these moves and how do you actually do them? And so we'll do additional practice. This is where we'll do additional practice in kind of responding to readings that we do in class. So I'll have students do a lot of writing based on the reading that they do. We also utilize a lot of pre-reading strategies. So one thing we realized is that we shouldn't just leave it to our reading faculty to deal with reading. Our students have grown up in this era where very few people do deep reading anymore. So they need these skills. Even if they have read, they haven't read the academic stuff that we want them to read. So they need help. So we give them those kind of reading instructions, so the writing class becomes much more a reading and writing class. We discuss and brainstorm ideas for the next essay. We review drafts of essays the students are working on for credit class. This is the grammar question. We work on reducing the frequency and severity of error in the student's writing. You can kind of see how I have that company line in my head. It just came right out. But this, I mean, I do think this is much more important than making students grammarians. It's making them aware that they need to work on their writing and that it needs to be intentional practice. And then we address non-cognitive issues. Again, we talk about this stuff in class. Some people make this a much stronger part of the program. For us, it's kind of informal. We tell teachers, we want you to talk about these things. We want you to think about these things. At Atlantic Cape Community College in Jersey, they actually make this part of the contract that ALP teachers have to sign, that they will become mentors and counselors to their students, which I think is great, which I'd love to be able to do. Right now we have so many teachers, it might be difficult for us to do, but going back and rethinking, I might make this part of our program. So that's what is ALP. And then the results, you definitely need to see some of the results. This again comes from CCRC, the Community College Research Center. They did a long study of us over about 3 or 4 years. So they had a huge number of traditional developmental students on the top, more than 5,000. And the numbers are probably pretty similar to 88 and 89, where you have about 65% passing and 35% failing. With ALP, we have a smaller sample size because we were just growing the program, but still it's a respectable sample size. And we find that 82% are passing even that developmental portion of the 052, the cohort class. So already right there you have a 17-point bump in the numbers. Students who actually go on and take 101, again, you have the same problem of students dropping out, just disappearing. We have no idea where they went. That's almost 1,000 students in a 3-year span who were successful in developmental, but who knows where they are now. We could have served them better. That does not happen in ALP because they're taking the 101 at the same time as they're taking the 052. And then you have the pass rates become 33% of the original ever pass 101, whereas 74% of students will pass in the ALP, will pass the 101. So this is right here is the strongest advertisement. This is why so many people are doing this, taking this model and doing it themselves or rethinking the model, because the numbers are incredible and they can't be, you can't deny that this is an important thing. We've more than doubled the possibility of students passing 101. Usually people will ask about 102 at this point, or whether students are actually going on, because I think there's a misconception about ALP that, oh, maybe you coddle the students, maybe you give them all this support, but once you take it off, are they going to fail? We have data that suggests that they're going through and they're persisting in their education. So you can see students taking 102, only 13% of these developmental students took 102, and about 50% of them took 102 for ALP. And in terms of pass rates, 10% will pass 102 and 33% of the ALP students. So it's not, we would like to see more students passing 102, but it's still a significant improvement over the traditional. We also have data that shows that students are getting more credit after passing ALP than they are traditionally. So you can see on the left-hand side, this is what we don't want students. We don't want students getting no credits after taking our developmental classes. So 30%, 32% never take another class. In ALP, that's only 18%. 1 to 5 credits, it's slightly higher. 6 to 11, it's about the same. 12 to 17, which is getting into the not quite full-time student range, 25% of students in ALP, and 18 to 23, which would be a larger chunk of credits, 13% of ALP. So again, students are persisting more through ALP than through the traditional model. This is very preliminary data. We've been doing this for 6 years, but our students are only just starting to pass because we're a community college and get their degrees and their certificates. So I truly believe this will be the most important slide in the next couple of years because it's going to go up tremendously. But right now, about 14% of traditional developmental education students got some kind of a degree. ALP students, that was 26%. In fall 2008, it's 8% and 11%, 6% and 11%, and 2% and 5%. So again, this is still early in the game. But the fact that we have 26% of students getting some kind of degree for developmental students, that's incredible. That's unheard of, you know? And this is what I wanted to show you before, where people were talking about should you only help kind of the cream of the crop of the 052 students? This suggests that we shouldn't. So pass rates in 101 by AccuPlacer score, and our AccuPlacer I think is 90. If you get a 90, you're in 101. So anything lower than that, you're in 052. So if you're in that, close to that upper range, 77% of students are passing 101 and 31% through the traditional developmental. So that's a span of 46%. The mid-range would be 25% versus 69%. So they're both going down a little bit. And then the next one is the low range of the 052 scores, where we have 77% of students passing and 23% of development. So with the traditional, it's going down. With us, with the ALP, actually the students at the lower range are benefiting much more from ALP than the other students. Does that make sense? This one took me a while to actually figure out. But I think, I mean, it's just testament to the fact that if you ask a student to do college-level work, more often than not, they will come up to your level. But if you're in a traditional developmental and you're saying you need to write a sentence before you can write a paragraph, you need to write a paragraph before you can write an essay, those students are never going to get to the point you want them to get at. So we start with this kind of idea of backward design. We start with the high-level academic assignment, and then we help students get to that point in the 052 classes. That's an important kind of philosophical underpinning of this whole movement. Yes, question? Huh? Yes. Yes. The teachers, we had same teacher in both groups. Oh, you mean the teachers in the... No. We weren't, well, that's kind of an interesting question. They're definitely, I taught standalones at the same time that I taught ALPs. So there were a lot of teachers who were doing both.
The other question I have is, thank you, the 10 students, you know, who took the additional 052 course, did they form study groups? Did they become a community of learners, do you think?
Yeah.
As opposed to
Not formally. Not formally, but
But you know what? Since they're meeting, you know, with you, let's say you.
Yes.
You know, in addition to the other students, did they bond together?
Oh, absolutely.
Did they study together?
They definitely bond together. Study groups, I know that a lot of the times a student in the ALP program, you'll see them next semester and they know the person who was in the ALP, and this person helped me out and helped me survive my 102 or helped me survive my math class. And a lot of the times they'll be working on their math directly after my 052 English section. They'll be getting their math out. So I think they do, in a very informal way, form study groups and they help each other. That kind of, you can't have a problem. I shouldn't talk about the problem, should I? But you can't have a problem with over-bonding, I think, once in a while. So I had one class, it was the only class where I ever experienced a death threat in the classroom, where the students just bonded a little too closely, you know? So I think that is a danger. If there is a danger of over-bonding, then yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
One of our previous speakers, Yuri Theismann.
Yeah.
I
see.
did not attend his presentation, but I heard him 20 years ago. And he mentioned the fact that his experiences at school in California with students who were taking math, that those students who worked together did better than those students who were the Lone Ranger, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And I think that whether you realize it or not, you know, our experiences here at the school, obviously, in many ways parallel what you have had. Many students who work in study groups, you know, seem to learn, you know, more
Oh, yeah.
and help each other in a sense that has a positive effect.
Definitely. Absolutely.
to the
Yeah, I think there is. We haven't studied it, but I think we could. And another thing I wanted to say is that I was thinking, well, I believe it was the keynote speaker was talking about connection and having people connect to the college. I think ALP makes that connection much more possible for more students. Actually, it was Uri Treisman. Actually, he was talking about how when he was a student, he had one teacher who just randomly decided he was going to bestow kindness on this person and say, you know, you're a great student, you can do this, you can do that. And why can't that be true for all of our students? Why can't all of our students get that? I think with ALP, that's what's happening. You're getting a classroom, you're in the classroom with one teacher and only 9 other fellow students. You're getting more attention, you're getting that kind of connection to the college. Yeah, I think that's hugely important. Yes. Yes.
I just had a quick question about expenses for the students. Are you sharing material in the 2 classes, textbooks, or is there something separate for each class?
It's really up to the ALP teacher what they want to do with the 052. I don't use any additional materials in 052. So we do a lot of writing again. So the writing becomes the content of that second class. Anything we read will be what we read in the 101. So I might do more reading work with the assignments. If I give an essay out for 101, we'll spend time in the 052 kind of dissecting it and how do you read this and different strategies. But I don't personally use additional material in 052. Most people, I think, do not, because it's a much more fluid class. So we have kind of these side-by-side syllabi that we plan on, but I never plan for more than 3 weeks because you're trying to figure out what your students need and then catering to those needs and not just assuming they all need to talk about fragments, because they don't. You know, maybe 2 students need to talk about fragments. Yeah.
Instead of having 2 teachers, wouldn't it be more non-judgment? Instead of having only 1 teacher, wouldn't it be more non-judgmental to have two teachers? Because if I have students in 052, I'm measuring them with certain expectations. But if I prepare them adequately, they should be able to function well with another teacher in 101. Do you have studies on this? Like if you have 2 different kinds of sections with the same teacher and 2 different teachers?
Right. One big study that's going on right now is Don Coleman, who is with a research institution I can't remember the name of, and Susan Gabriel, who's with CCBC. They're studying how people do this differently, do ALP differently. So they're studying whether it makes a difference if you have 2 different teachers in the 101 and in the 052. The results of that have not come out yet. But I think in terms of judgmental, I mean, we all have the same common course outlines for 101. So those are the things we need to meet. And the 052, I I personally think we should throw away the 052 CCO. It only matters whether they're getting the 101. You know, we want them to get that 101 credit, and that's what's going to help them further down the line. So for me, it's not a matter of being judgmental or non-judgmental. It's just a matter of throwing that out and sticking to the 101.
Okay, I have another question.
Yes.
In addition to taking the 052 and the 101 together as co-requisites, are these students also taking other college-level courses in other areas or connecting in some way to their major program or something that they're interested in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we need to get more intentional, just like the keynote speaker was talking about getting on the pathways. We do have the start of academies at our school, and those 101 students, they're in 101, so those other things are open to them. So right now, they're 101 students. They're considered. It does open a lot for them. Yeah. Yes.
I would love to teach 10 students so that they can get the
Yes.
attention. But for the developmental classes, we have 30 students and more. So I don't know how we can work that through the ALP program.
Right. I mean, I think you need to talk about this, and you need to make the argument, and I can share my PowerPoint with you that shows that this is not more expensive per successful student. So the small class size, I think, is important. There are other classes, there are other institutions that are doing this in a different way. So they'll take 2 101 classes, and they'll be mixed population. And those 2 classes, the developmental students in those 2 classes will go down to 1 052 class. So it's still, I think, 18 people in that class. So there's different ways to do this. Our argument is definitely not there's only one way to do this. There are multiple ways. But I personally think the small class size is essential. I mean, I think that is so important. When I started, we had 8 students. And we only got 2 credit hours for teaching those. And in order to get buy-in from a lot of the faculty, we went up to 10, and we get now 3 credit hours. So, I mean, I think it makes financial sense. I think it makes pedagogical sense. And I think you can make those arguments. How much time do I have? I don't want to go over.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. So what's most important?
Can I ask one question, please?
Yes.
Do you see any applications? I know that one of my huge concerns as a longstanding teacher has been the 102 student.
Huh?
Can you see any kind of applications for this kind of an approach with 102 where you really don't control the reading material the way that you do in the 101 classes? And yet, for 102 students, this seems to be we have enormous attrition.
So how do you approach your 102 classes?
They have to write a research paper. It's also an introduction to literature, and so we have been encouraged, although some of us have been resistant, to have the research paper be on a literary topic, which provides, for material that is sometimes far too sophisticated for our students to deal with. It's been a real problem.
So, I mean, one thing I would suggest is that you think about the connection between your 101 and your 102. Right. That's one thing we're doing very vigorously right now is that's basically our 102 was a literature class. And the 101 was a hardcore composition class. We used rhetorical text. And there was very little carryover between the two. And that makes no sense. They should be learning in 102 what they're learning in 101 just at a higher level. I think of it in terms of kind of music. In music, if you're playing the piano, you have advanced music classes, you have intermediate music classes, you have beginner music classes. In writing, you should have, the 102 should be an advanced composition class, in my opinion. And in literature should be something else. But in any case, I think you should definitely think about integrating the two. But how would that work with an ALP? I'm not sure the connection with ALP and the literature.
One quick question, is most of the writing in the class, in-class writing, as opposed to out-of-class assignments? Do they do most of their writing in class?
In the cohort class, yes.
Yes. Okay,
Yes.
wonderful.
Yep.
I agree.
And just a couple of things I want to touch on before I have no time. We do have 184 schools that we know of doing some version of ALP. And again, sometimes it's very different. In New Jersey, we have these 6 schools. We have an annual conference that we hold in Baltimore, or have held in Baltimore, every year. Next year, we're going to California. The year after that, we'll be in Baltimore again. So if you're interested in any of these ideas, ALP is just one approach to acceleration. There are other approaches as well. These we think are critical features. Again, we're doing studies to figure out whether these are critical features, but these are things we think might be critical features. So we absolutely think it's important that students take the credit class and the developmental class at the same time. We think part of the problem with developmental was this whole idea of stepping it up, and then you lose so many students. We think it's important that the same teacher teaches the 2 classes. We think it's important that at least half the students are credit, so you have that role model effect. We believe the ALP cohort is no more than 12 students, and that number is pulled out of nowhere. But I do think it's, it is different to teach a class of 15 versus a class of 10 to 12. We think it's important to talk about the non-cognitive issues. And again, this idea of backward design, I didn't get to talk much about pedagogy. This is, for me, the most interesting thing about ALP is that it makes teaching different. How you actually approach teaching, it's exciting. If you have teachers who think that developmental education is boring, this approach is exciting. You're always on the go. You're always trying to figure things out. You're giving students real college-level difficult tasks, and you're helping them to do that with all kinds of scaffolding activities and pre-reading, and that to me is what makes this so exciting, in addition to the fact that we're helping so many students. So I won't go to the costs. Do we have time for one more question or no? Do we have one more question? Okay. What's that?
No. You identified English 052, and you also identified English 051.
Yes.
When they take the AccuPlacer test, they go into that or 101,
Yep.
those 3.
Yep.
So you focused on the 052 students,
Yes.
okay, because you feel I guess they have enough of a background to handle the 101s. What has happened with the others?
With the 052, that's that ACLT class I was explaining. And I know it's a lot of information really quickly, but the ACLT class takes the 4 bottom-level reading and writing. So 051 reading, 051 writing, 052 reading, 052 writing. If you place in any combination of those, you can place into a 5-credit class. And it talks about it's kind of a very progressive pedagogy where we give students difficult texts and help them meet that. It's very similar to what I'm talking with backward design. But that's what we do with 051 students right now. If they can handle, that's rigorous. So and a lot of times they won't be able to handle it. Yes. Okay, well, I guess that's it. Thank you.